The sound of wood cracking breaking jolted me out of coffee. And when I stepped outside, all I could see was dust. A wrecking excavator and 3 HOA board members, standing in folding chairs like it was a 4th of July parade. And right where my dam had been gone destroyed, Karen was even wearing a sash that read, "Water belongs to the HOA." I just stood there in my bare feet, in my flannel pajama pants, blinking at the backhoe claw that had just destroyed the one thing keeping them all safe from Mother Nature's wrath. Yeah, that's me. You're most likely asking how I came to be here. They say you never know your neighbors until you build something they don't get. For me, that time came the summer after I finished building the dam. It wasn't some giant concrete monster, just a good engineering reinforced earth, and dam with a stone retaining wall, and a manually operated SL gate that I put in place with my own 2 hands over a span of 3 years. Each rock, each timber, each sandbag was placed by hand with purpose, born of hours of hydrology, reports on erosion surveys, and consultations with my late uncle, who happened to be a retired Army Corps engineer. My property is at the top of a ridge overlooking the Oak Hollow Estates, a prim and proper HOA-ruled labyrinth of cul-de-sacs and beige vinyl houses with flower beds controlled to 2 types of mulch. What most of them never trouble to realize is that their entire development is built in a natural floodplain, one which flooded like clockwork every 5 to 7 years prior to my owning the property, and rerouted the runoff through a controlled channel system. My dam was the final section built to hold back the seasonal rain swell and drain it slowly via spillways and French drains. It was like a charm, the comic touch they didn't even know the dam was there for the first 2 years. It existed. But the instant Karen moved in and became HOA president, she started complaining about things like the fact that her mulch wasn't washing away in April anymore, or that the little creek in her backyard had turned into a trickle rather than torrent. She felt change, but she couldn't read it. That was dangerous. And I knew there was going to be trouble when she showed up uninvited at my fence line wearing white jeans espadrilles and a face like she'd just tasted a lemon rind. "I'm here regarding the building," she said, waving her hand vaguely toward the dam, which wasn't even visible from where she was. "It's not in harmony with the natural beauty of the community." I replied sensibly that my property was not in my neighborhood. I was not subject to HOA control, and I had permits several, approved by the county, the water district, and the Office of Drainage Soil. "I am afraid it is still a safety hazard," she said, eyes narrowing. "If there is no water there, what are you even trying to hold back? You constructed something that does not need to be. And that makes it suspicious." That word suspicious hung in the air like smoke. The next month, I received not 1, not 2, but 17 violation notices from the HOA, each more absurdist than the last. Unapproved earthwork, unapproved water retention, visual disruption to neighborhood tranquility. I wasn't even a dues-paying member. And yet they catch me 300 for causing hydrological confusion. I planted a flag in the sand on that one. Then the letters came threatening to turn me in. To County Code Enforcement, the EPA, even FEMA. I sent certified responses back with photopies of all approval documentation annotated in red. That's when the flyers started showing up. Printed bulletins left in every mailbox in Oak Hollow. Warning of the shadow reservoir on private property. The unregulated body of water being used without permission. They made it sound like I was going to call forth Moses and part the damn thing down Main Street. I could have sued for slander, but I didn't. I waited, I put up trail cams, I kept records, and I kept the gate on the dam chained with a chain I welded closed. Then one weekend, I had to be away from town. My cousin got married in Montana, and I didn't want to miss it. Before I left, I made my rounds, checked the spillways supported the retaining edge with gravel, and made sure the secondary runoff pipe was clear. I even left a note at the trailhead that said, "Private property, do not trespass structure spied on by cameras." I was gone for 48 hours. When I got back, the air was off. You know when you open your fridge and can't quite put your finger on the smell, but you know something has died. That's what it was like getting to the hill. The quiet was too loud. My boots clicked gravel on the slope, and as I crested the ridge, my stomach dropped into my knees. The dam was gone, bulldozed, flattened like it never have been there. All that was remaining was a gash in the earth, a rubble dump, and a lone, agonized splinter of the slate gate sticking up out of the mud like a tombstone. There were skid marks going off into the HOA complex construction vehicle-wide ones. I there for 5 whole minutes, mouth dry, ears ringing. And then I got a glimpse, a laminated sign nailed to a stake fluttering in the wind like a gaudy plastic banner. It read, "Removal of unauthorized structure, pursuant to Section 8.3 of the Oak Hollow Estates Covenant." There was no signature, no date, just an HOA letterhead and a list of board-approved action items. My face burned. I wanted to scream, but instead I turned on my heel and walked to the nearest trail cam. Gone ripped from the tree, mounting bracket left dangling like a crushed limb. I entered the second one. The same third crushed by a rock. But I had backups, redundant micro-recorders in the control box of the dam. And what they recorded gave me blood chills. The recording recorded 2 men in orange vests. No visible company logo, seen sawing at the chain of the select gate with bolt cutters. In a minute, a rented bobcat drove on set and started crashing into the foundation of the dam. Karen stood there wearing her HOA badge like a deputy, barking orders and drinking iced coffee. "Clear it all out, this area is an eyesore," she said on tape. If he wanted to build a reservoir, he should have come to us first. Asked us this was my land, my permits, my labor, and she treated it like a wayward garden gnome. I uploaded the video to a flash drive, printed the permit package again, and drove directly to the county offices. I made reports. I phoned my water engineer. I had the damage estimated site mapped out, restoration quotes totaled more than 42. And that didn't account for the ecological impact or the downstream risk. Because here's the thing. The dam wasn't a pond. It was a buffer. It was a protection. It prevented 170 gallons of possible floodwater from flowing downhill into a subdivision built on clay-heavy ground with 1,980 French drains and no retention walls. And monsoon season was just 2 weeks away. It started with a drizzle, like it always does. The kind that taps on your windows, like an old friend promising coffee and quiet mornings. But I knew better. I'd been watching the weather patterns, tracking the NOAA satellite data like a hawk, and I knew this was not going to be a normal rain. A warm front from the Gulf had rammed into a stuck cold system above our valley, and the model showed a 7-day stretch of unceasing rain, a 1 in 10 year kind of storm. And this time, the dam was not there to take the hit. My fingers drummed against the kitchen table as the rain grew heavier, striking the tin awning outside with a machine gun impact. It had been 6 days since we learned the dam had been destroyed. And despite filing police reports, environmental violation notices, and county code complaints, nothing had moved. Not a fine, not a citation. The county engineer's office gave me a weak apology and a referral to small claims court. Meanwhile, the HOA went radio silent. No response to certified letters, no explanation for their illegal demolition. Just a smug silence behind freshly power-washed fences and perfectly symmetrical hedges. I sat by the window and watched the clouds roll in like an army. By the second day, the soil was already filled up. By the third, my gravel path was oatmeal. I trudged the ridge every morning, raincoat on boots, sliding into the slurry that was once my trail. Water attracted to spots it never used to before filling the low spots left by the bulldozer that gutted out the dam basin I'd installed temporary BMS to slow runoff. But they were not made for this amount. Without the dam's retention pool to bring everything to a slower pace, each and every drop of water that had fallen upon my hillside now charged ahead straight into Oak Hollow Estates, an HOA subdivision that in their own published newsletters claimed higher brouhaha, drain solutions, and mutuality of response. I came so close to guilt, almost. At the 4th evening, at precisely 2:37 a.m., it happened. A loud, soggy crack boomed through the darkness like timber breaking down in a tornado. I jumped up from bed, pounding in my chest, and rushed to the window. Even in the rain, I could hear the low rumble of moving earth. I laced on my boots and a flashlight and staggered outside into the mud. And there along the ridge, I saw it. Water not seeping, not gathering, surging. A full-blown cascading sheet of brown tumbling liquid tearing through the top of the HOA boundary like a mudslide in a Hollywood disaster flick. I ran to the overlook, and what I saw froze me cold. The backyard retaining wall that Karen's cul-de-sac made of faux stone and arrogance had sheared neatly off at the base. A 30-foot section now reclined halfway down the slope, shattered like a fallen tenacious. Behind it, her beautiful backyard formerly inhabited by a gazebo and koi pond was a sludge pit, complete with patio chairs crashing about like forgotten pool toys. Beneath it, created in its place with patio furniture, the street below was a bad sight water had consumed. The main road washing away mulch trash cans, and God only knows what else. Down the asphalt river driveways were inundated cars, floating up to their side mirrors. I saw a garden gnome decoration get sent like a torpedo through someone's front window. It would have been funny if it wasn't so damn biblical. I ran back inside and grabbed my camera, chronicling everything. I got the breach, the runoff, the buckling sidewalks, and burst drainage grates. And then I got the for sale sign drifting down the hill as if it was riding a lazy river. By sunrise, the landscape looked like a war zone. Emergency personnel arrived just as the sun burst through the cloud cover to illuminate a golden glow on sheer suburban ruin. Karen stood on her lawn in a pink robe, yelling into her phone as 2 firefighters waited patiently through her front yard with a rubber boat. Her hydrangeas were underwater, her mailbox was in pieces, and her eyes met mine over the floodplain with the intensity of someone who had just figured out they made the wrong opponent. I waved that afternoon when the HOA board met at the community center, trying to assess damage and coordinate cleanup. Something even better happened. The county emergency manager came by with a clipboard and a pair of yellow boots. She paced the area with the grim efficiency of one who's seen disaster zones, not luxury townhomes. And then she did something I did not expect. She hiked straight up the ridge and knocked on my door. "Mr. Allen?" she asked, wiping rain from her glasses. "You the property owner at parcel 83. B, I nodded cautious. You had a private retention structure on this slope, correct? I let her in and took her through the footage before and after. Shots of the dam, the permits, the blueprints, the documentation, the drone scans, and the video of the HOA's unauthorized demolition. She didn't say much, just took a lot of notes. This runoff event triggered a floodplain reclassification. She at last said, closing her notebook. That means insurance premiums, infrastructure, retrofits, environmental remediation. Big money, big liability. I cocked my head. You think the HOA is liable? She looked up. Oh, they're already blaming you. My eyebrows shot up. Me. Yep, she said bluntly. Filed a preliminary complaint with the county this morning, telling me that you dismantled an essential stormwater barrier without board approval, resulting in total community devastation. I laughed so hard, I almost spilled my coffee. That was my dam on my land with my permits. No, she said, turning the page. And that's why this just got interesting. In 24 hours, the story had totally shifted. Emails were sent accusing me of unauthorized alteration of landform features. And Karen posted a drawn-out rant on the Nextdoor app calling me reckless hydrologist wannabe, who endanger our community for personal motivations. My name had trending on the Facebook page of the neighborhood. They called me damn man, like I was wetland vigilante. But that's where things got delicious by trying to put the finger at my door. The HOA had inadvertently allowed that the deconstruction of the dam created the flood damages which were dynamite legal. Because if they said it was the lack of dam which inflicted the damage, then they'd essentially confirmed that the dam had been necessary, which implied its destruction without due process authorization or lawful mandate was not merely a mistake, but willful negligence. Their own words were going to be the rope with which they'd cut their own heads off. I sent it all to the cloud and mailed copies to my attorney. She was already drafting a countersuit. In the meantime, the citizens of Oak Hollow were starting to wake up. A crowd formed at the community center when they discovered the HOA might be the culprit for their basements now being indoor pools. One of the men, a quiet mortgage broker named Vince, stood up and wanted to know why the board had approved land-changing measures without a vote. Karen tried to bend around it, but it was clear the tide had turned. The residents were furious. Their houses were flooded. Their insurance companies were calling. And Karen looked like someone trying to dam a flood with a rake. The storm had passed, but the reckoning had only begun. They filed the lawsuit exactly 9 days following the flood-certified letter. Hand-delivered, slipped into a stiff folder with a gold-embossed lettering like a wedding invitation instead of a call to war. The Oak Hollow Estates Homeowners Association, by and through their counsel, was suing me for gross negligence, willful damage to property, and reckless manipulation of terrain, causing catastrophic community loss. I was standing barefoot in my kitchen, reading the packet 3 times. The rain still dripping from the gutters outside like an encore from hell. They were blaming me, the one person who'd spent 3 years building a solution to the very problem they'd just unleashed with bulldozers and ego. According to their legal fantasy novel, I had abandoned my retention structure, let it fall into disrepair, and then deliberately taken it down, without notifying the appropriate authorities, resulting in uncontrolled watershed release. They even superimposed cherry-picked satellite images, after they bulldozed the dam as proof of my non-compliance. They had no idea what was to descend upon them. I phoned my attorney Sarah, same woman who helped me acquire the original dam permits. And she laughed so hard I thought she was going to suffocate on her coffee. "They're suing you?" She said, "This is a gift I haven't seen Mal practice this bold since that time a zoning board constructed a dog park atop a buried septic system." I talked to her the next morning. We put it all out on her enormous oak conference table. The permits stamped by 3 separate agencies. The engineering drawings signed off by a licensed hydrologist. The land surveys with topographical overlays. And the photos, dozens of them I had before and after, drone shots. Trail cam stills, time-stamped video of the HOA contractors cutting the chain off the cell gate. Even voice of Karen speaking, "Cleared all this eyesore." The piest engaging in a thermal drone pass from 3 weeks ago, showing the water distribution gradient and runoff patterns with the dam intact. Sarah glared at it as if it were the Mona Lisa. "We're not just going to fight this," she said, eyes sparkling. "We're going to bury them in it." So we filed a countersuit. Cross-complaint, in fact, we accused illegal demolition of a building that had been authorized trespassing, destruction of private infrastructure, violation of local floodplain management regulations, and most importantly, interference with an engineered water control system during an active hydrological danger season. We subpoenaed the contractors who operated the bulldozer. Turns out they were a landscaping crew hired off Craigslist for cash. They had no licenses and no insurance and claimed to be working under orders from Karen. It was a decorative berm. One of them testified under oath that he'd posed, "Shouldn't we get the homeowners okay first?" and was replied, "He doesn't live here, he'll thank us later." The court date was scheduled for 3 weeks out. The HOA, to their credit, doubling down. They held an emergency meeting in which Karen said to residents, "I was attempting to extort the community with junk science and retaliation lawsuits." She framed it as I had removed the dam to punish them. But more and more people were starting to speak. Insurance adjusters were lurking like vultures. 6 houses had been declared temporarily uninhabitable. Mold had already started to develop in drywall. One family had to live in a motel. The premiums were rising and fast. Then came the kicker. The County Flood Control Board released an official statement after an independent examination of the event. It confirmed in very dry bureaucratic terms that the demolition of the private retention structure materially contributed to the severity of the flooding experienced by homeowners within the Oak Hollow Estates subdivision. The dam was important, and it wasn't me who blew it up. That finding didn't simply validate my counterclaim. It opened the door to something much greater. Liability, Karen and her companions had authorized destruction of a registered flood control structure without a court order or county notification. That's not just civil overreach, that's approaching criminal negligence. We went to court a month later, dressed like we were there for a funeral because we were theirs. Their attorney tried to depict me as a renegade property owner with God syndrome, a fellow who had sketched out a dam for ego, not safety, and then purposefully took it down in the most hydrologically unpredictable month of the year. But Sarah was ready. She projected the drone footage on a large screen to the jury of the dam entire 1 week. Went by the next, followed by wide shots of the mudslide that shredded Karen's backyard like a soup-concocted bulldozer. Then she distributed laminated copies of my permits, signed, dated, highlighted. Then there was the kicker, a copy of the HOA's own meeting minutes during which they voted to destroy it. Someone on the board, bless their heart, had added the words, "Take care of the damn issue while he's away," to the summary. The courtroom went dead silent when the judge read those aloud. Karen shifted position in her seat as if she is sitting on a hot plate. When we called the contractor up for cross-examination, it only got worse. "Did you obtain permission from the landowner to demolish the dam?" Sarah asked no. "Did you obtain any documents from the county authorizing it?" No. "Did you notify anyone at the HOA that you did not think it was legal?" Yes, I notified. The blonde lady. And what did she say? He cleared his throat, she told me, quoting, "This whole neighborhood's on our side. He's just some loner with a hill and a grudge." The jury did not even look confused. They looked angry. Final ruling handed down 2 weeks later. The judge dismissed the HOA suit entirely, citing lack of merit, malicious intent, and his words gross procedural misconduct. Then there was the ruling on the countersuit. They were held liable on 4 counts: unlawful demolition, property damage, environmental code violation, and negligent contribution to municipal flooding. The HOA was ordered to pay damages $1,870 for structural loss, $62,000 for environmental remediation, $13,000 for legal fees, and an additional $50,000 in punitive damages for good measure. I walked out of the courthouse with a check for more than I'd spent building the dam. But money wasn't the win. The win was what came next. Karen was removed as HOA president within a week. A petition distributed calling for the resignation of the entire board. 3 members stepped down, 1 moved out of state. The HOA also voted to create a new monitoring committee to make sure that there were no unilateral decisions. And the best part of all my land was rezoned as an environmental buffer zone, untouched by HOA control. No more notices, no more pink clipboards, no more laminated threats left on my gate. Just peace and gravity and water where it belonged. I never dreamed the end of a war so quiet. No crash of gavel, no fireworks. Merely the soft churn of filled earth and the rhythmic thud of shovels as a dozen or so neighbors cajoled their work into done what ignorance had tried to destroy. My damned, the one same the HOA once deemed a threat to community planning, stood reformed again. Stone by stone in a ceiling no longer menacing. This once was just me, stacking on the stone wall or measuring the spillway angles. It was Vince from Lot 9 who used to ignore me at the feed store. It was Martha who lost her herb garden to the flood. It was even the Martinez twins, whose basement was still being gutted for mold, handing me rebar like it was penance. Nobody spoke about the trial, not out loud. But the weight of what had happened hung in the way. People moved in the careful thought for their deeds. There was a reciprocal respect now for the planet, for the water. And to my surprise for me, it was strange being thanked for something that I'd been cursed about. But that's the way it goes. In small-town America. 1 month you're the bitter hillman with a doomsday bunker, and the next you're the man who saved our foundations. Time and floodwaters have a way of washing reputations. The county had issued its ultimate ruling just 2 weeks prior. Not only had the HOA lost their lawsuit and been found liable, but the judge, exasperated with their BS, had also referred them for review to the state attorney general's office. That mini-voluntary investigation uncovered years of abused dues, backdoor contractor deals, and a whole panoply of bylaw violations, enough to paper a courthouse. It was discovered Karen had been awarding landscaping contracts to her nephew's firm at triple the going rate. The flood-friendly mulch project they had launched last year, hoax, the Emergency Retention Basin Fund, depleted spent on administrative dinners and training retreats. There were subpoenas, interviews, audits. I didn't have to lift a finger. The system had teeth this time, and it finally decided to bite. Karen tried to spin, of course, blamed the board. Blamed erroneous intentions. At one time, she claimed I hacked the HOA emails to frame her. But the receipts didn't lie, and neither did the electronic paper trail leading straight to her PayPal account entered HOA executive consulting fees. The HOA was officially closed at the close of that month. County inspectors had declared them functionally tainted and administratively negligent. What that meant in concrete terms was sweet. No more dues, no more infractions, no more laminated alerts about mailbox colors or lawn fume. The authority which once flowed through their bylaws now dripped in vain into a heap of canceled charters and unpaid lawyer bills. And speaking of unbilled bills, those didn't go away with the HOA either. The civil court made board members individually responsible for the uncovered damages or the defunct HOA budget. Karen Richard and 2 others were forced to pay an aggregate restitution package valued at $2,110. Karen appealed twice, lost both. By the time it was said and done, she'd mortgaged her house, depleted her savings, and sold her precious BMW at private auction just to keep her head above water. It wasn't sufficient. A month following the verdict, a feral sign appeared on her front yard, and not a quiet, respectful one. No, it was one of those gaudy orange-motivated Seller Aces signs that screamed desperation larger than a fire alarm. She got perhaps 40% of what the house had appraised at last year. Gossip was that she found a job in some flat suburb beyond Tulsa. Last I heard, she was moderating a Facebook group about HOA free living and grievance with squirrels. About myself, I recreated. Not the dam itself, but the trust I having a cookout on the first weekend after the last retaining wall was finished. People came armed with casseroles, coolers, and regrets. We sat in folding chairs up around the ridge and looked downward into the valley. It's peaceful now, serene. You still saw dark shapes of where the flood had cut its way along the streets, patches of fresh concrete, incongruous siding grass reviving in unusual little whirls. But nature mends. So do human beings if you provide them with cause to. A few days after that, I installed the new sign. I screwed it into a heavy post just alongside the spillway, where the runoff seeped calmly into the downstream culvert plain. Aluminum plaque, weatherproofed black lettering on silver background, it said, "Next time inquire of the fellow who grasps gravity." Below it, in smaller font, I planted the dam specs, drainage capacity, and county permit number. No ego, just fact. The flood turned believers out of all of them. Even the HOA DRs who never admitted they were wrong started taking their dogs beyond the dam with sly nods and tighter leashes. One even left a thank you note. No name, just "you were right." We're sorry. Now every time the clouds gather and the forecast mentions storms, I sleep just as well. Not because of faith in the weather, but because of faith in what I built and who I built it with. There's a certain poetry to it. This little spot, once a field of warfare, of paperwork, of pettiness, now spreads its weary wings and heaves a happy sigh. The creek babbles, the earth cradles. The frogs are all back, and the kids are all splashing in the shoals like nothing's happened. But they haven't forgotten.